Before constructing your ponds, the most important thing you must consider is site selection. Proper site selection. If you select a poor site, then you will have problems during construction and after you have put fish into the ponds. Now, let us look at some of the factors you need to consider when selecting a proper site for your fish ponds. The first thing to consider is the slope or the gradient of your site. This should be considered in relation to the place where you want to construct your pond and also in relation to the source of water. Water for use in your ponds should be able to drain freely by gravity from the source into the pond, and it should also be able to drain out without pumping. Always try as much as possible to avoid areas that are prone to floods. If your site is too flat, you will have a problem during heavy rains, especially when there are floods. And if the area is too steep, you will also have problems. The first problem is during construction. A lot of labor will be required to move soil from the upper end of the pond to the lower end in order to construct the walls. Also, the upper end may be too deep and dangerous for people who may be operating around the pond. Another problem will be if there is a lot of rain on the upper areas. A lot of water will flow down the slope at high speed, and it may end up breaking the walls and flooding your ponds. Also remember that high walls may easily collapse, especially during the wet season. Another major factor to consider when selecting your site is water availability. This water is supposed to be clean, it is supposed to be in plenty, and it is supposed to be available throughout the year. The most common sources of water for our ponds include small streams. Avoid rivers because they are not predictable. Other sources of water include water springs, boreholes and shallow wells, water from roof catchment or rain runoff, but under these circumstances, water may be scarce during the dry season. So you will be required to protect your pond from losing a whole lot of water by either using liners or by constructing concrete ponds. The third most important factor to consider is soil type. Always ensure that the area you have selected does not have any big stones, rocks or boulders, either on top of the ground or protruding from under the surface. Any protruding rocks within or around the site are a sign of possibly bigger rocks under the ground. Again, the soil should not have excessive pebbles or sand or gravel, because these are highly porous and they lead to the loss of water. The soil should also not contain a lot of clay. This is because clay soils develop very huge cracks, which may lead to water loss through seepage. Another factor to consider is the presence of big trees and tree stumps. These trees have very long roots which may extend up to the pond site. When these roots start rotting, the rotten roots will form spaces that look like pipes, which will lead water away from the ponds. A similar problem will also be caused by termites and moles, which reside under the ground. The paths which these two make under the ground are a major source of water loss from ponds. These can be very devastating, especially when you are filling the pond for the first time. The fourth major factor to consider is security of your fish. Market is also of critical importance. Try to find out all the possible buyers of your fish before you decide to enter into fish farming. You must also consider access to your farm. It is important to have accessible roads, and if possible, you may also be required to have electricity. Cost implications are very critical at this stage. You need to consider whether you are going to use manual labor for small ponds, or you will be hiring machines and excavators for bigger ponds.